The Schwinn MPower console system has three parts. You've got a console, you've got an RPM, or what some people call a speed sensor, which is this sensor mounted in this housing, and you've got the power or watt sensor. The first thing you have to do when you get a new system, or when you have a system where you're replacing a part, is to pair all the parts. Much like you would pair a headset to your phone using Bluetooth, it's the same idea. It's a coded pairing process, and once they're paired, they will always stay paired with each other until you repair them with something else. Once they're paired, you can replace batteries, do anything like that, and they'll stay paired with each other. So to pair them together, the first thing you have to do is turn on the console. Each sensor and the console has a pairing button. In the back of the sensors, you can see a rectangular red button. In the back of the console, you can see a round red button. To perform pairing, step one, push the round red button in the back of the console. On the front of the console, you'll see timers, the word pairing. Timers start to count down. As soon as they start counting down, push the red button in the back of the power sensor, push the red button in the back of the RPM speed sensor. What we're looking for is for these lights to either both turn out, which means it's stopped trying, or for the green light to stay on. Once they both go out, as soon as they both go out, push both of these buttons again. As long as this timer is still counting down, you can try again. What we're looking for is for it to pass. Now, the lights went out again, which means it didn't pair. You'll notice on the console, we have a pass on the right side, it says fail on the left side. That means pairing didn't work. What you do in that instance, try again. So we're going to push the red button, watch the timers. As soon as they start going, we're going to push the button in the back of the power sensor, button in the back of the RPM sensor. We're watching the lights. After a couple of non-passes, pull the battery out, put the battery back in, push the button, try again. That's what we're looking for. Green light only, pass on the console here, we're paired. Once you get the green light, 2 passes, the whole system is paired together and it's ready to be mounted to the bike. Mounting the console and the sensors to the bike is pretty simple. Console mounts here at the top. There's a bracket that mounts with 2 screws underneath. The console slides onto the bracket. The watt sensor mounts to the side of the plastic of the brake with 2 screws. Mounts this way. The RPM or speed sensor mounts here on the front of the chain guard with 2 screws that are on the chain guard. You pull those out, put the sensor on, put the screws in. The most important thing when mounting is the spacing of the RPM sensor to the wheel. You've got a magnet embedded inside the wheel, and this sensor reads it. What's important is to get this sensor as close to the wheel as you can without having it rub. If it's too far away from the wheel, it won't read the magnet and you won't get RPMs or anything else on your console. We're going to talk about calibration. So once you've mounted the console to the bike, the next thing you have to do is calibrate it. What calibration is the power sensor is mounted to the brake. What you're going to do is tell the power sensor where the top position of the brake is. Once you've told it that, much like when you zero a scale before you weigh yourself, you'll tell it where the top is. From there it knows how to calculate your power or your watts based on that top position. So the first thing you have to do when you're going to calibrate is wake up the power sensor. So to conserve battery, when it's not being used, it goes to sleep. Wake it up, couple steps. First thing you want to do is you want to spin the wheel. You got to make sure you get a few RPMs going on the wheel, and that's going to make sure the power sensor can wake up. Once you're doing that, the next thing you do is you take the red brake knob and you push it down and hold it down. Now, when I turn on my console, what I'm looking for is for the dashes in the watts box to go from dashes to a number. Once they turn into a number, like 0, that means my power sensor's turned on. I'm going to let the brake go, and then I'm going to spin the wheel again, And what I want to see is I want to see a number other than 0 there. All right, so that tells me my power sensor's on and active. Once it's on and active, it'll stay on for 5 minutes. That'll give us time to calibrate. Once your power sensor's active, you need to enter the service mode. Entering service mode, I'm going to hold down the stage and the average N button together for about 5 seconds. The screen will change to the service mode screen. I've got here, it says units. What I'm going to do is scroll using the average N button until I see the word calibrate. That's where I perform calibration. Hit light button. The light button is my enter button in the service menu. Now, up is flashing, and up calibration is what I want to perform because we're taking the brake all the way up. I hit my enter button, my light button. Now it tells me to turn resistance to 0 and push light. What that's telling me to do is make sure my brake is all the way in the up position. Turn it all the way counterclockwise till you can't turn it anymore. Once you've done that, double check, then push your light button. Please wait. Starts counting down. The word pass flashes. We've calibrated the brake and we're ready to ride. Now, the only mistake you can make, and that's why the instruction is here, is if you do calibration and you don't have your brake all the way in the up position, it will be like zeroing your scale out at somewhere other than 0, and your watt readings are going to be really off. So if you do a calibration and you're not sure you did it right, or if you're riding and you're getting very weird watt values, what you want to do is come back and do a calibration and make sure that brake's all the way in the up position. You can actually check the calibration of the bike. What you do is in the service menu, go to the calibrate menu. I'm going to hit my light button or enter button. Up is flashing. I'm going to use the average N button to scroll to the option that says current angle. On that one I hit my light button, and now it says current angle non-flashing, and I have a number in the bottom right. Now that number in the bottom right is telling me the current angle of the brake. Right now you can see I'm getting a 0.0 and it's fluctuating slightly. 0.0 is exactly what I want with the brake all the way in the up position. Now you saw it move a little bit. You saw a 0.2. A 9 actually serves as a negative sign. So if you see a 9, that means a negative. It's a fine resolution system. So some movement here, if you see a 0.1 or a 0.2 or a 90.1 or 0.2, that's okay, because you're gonna see that bit of fluctuation you won't notice when you're riding. It won't affect the wattage readings. But this tells us we have a good calibration. Now if I came here, now I'll turn the brake down. I'll adjust the brake down by turning the brake handle, and you can actually see that the angle value changes as the brake goes down. And if I bring it back up, it'll slowly come back up and come back to 0. So if I come in here, bring my brake all the way to the up position, and this number isn't right around 0.0, 0.2, recalibrate. Okay, so this is rider calibration. The MPower console has an option that you can activate that will have the rider, it'll walk the rider through a calibration every time they turn on the console and get ready to ride. You have to first turn on the option. So to turn on the option, you go into the service menu, holding down the stage and the average N button together for about 3 seconds. Scroll using the average N button to the calibrate option of the menu. Hit the light button to enter. Up is flashing. I'm going to hit average N and scroll until I see rider flashing. You see it says off, so that option's off right now. I hit the light button, rider calibrate, off is flashing. I use my average N button to select on. Then to actually select it, hit the light button, enter. So I've now turned on rider calibration. Once rider calibration's on, the first thing that's going to happen when I turn on the console and get ready to ride is it's going to walk me through the calibration process. So if you're a rider and you come to a bike, you get on, you get yourself set up, and then you turn on the console, the screen is going to look like this. It's going to say ready to calibrate, push light. Now, like with a service mode calibration, it's important that the wheel has been spun. Now, someone getting on a bike and getting themselves set up is going to do that naturally. And it really only takes about a quarter of a spin of the wheel to make that happen. If you're coming through in a service way and you're using rider calibration, you just want to make sure to spin the wheel. Once you've done that, follow the instruction. Ready to calibrate? Push light. So I'm going to push the light button. Now it says push brake down and hold. You're going to want to push down the red brake and hold it. You can see it already flipped and said release brake, which it does when it wakes up. So that power sensor woke up really quickly. Once the power sensor's awake and you've let go of the brake, you get the instruction turn resistance to 0, push light. You make sure your brake's all the way up, then you push the light button. Please wait, it starts counting down, then it says ready to ride. We've successfully calibrated the bike and we're ready to ride. With rider calibration, it's important to note, if the calibration is not successful, that's okay. Because what the console will do is it use the last calibration, which most likely was the class before or the day before, which will be totally fine. The way to think about it is it will only take the new calibration if it finds a calibration better than the one it already has stored in its system. So if you don't get ready to ride, it will just go to this screen, to the ride menu. You'll still get watts, the values will still be correct, and you'll still be able to go forward. So it's not a bad thing if you don't get ready to ride every single time you use the rider calibration, but you will get it most of the time. With rider calibration, there's one note that's important to remember. When you turn on the console and it's in rider calibration mode, if you have a new sensor that you need to replace, so you need to do pairing, or if you need to get into the service menu, you can't do it from this rider calibration screen. You have to exit this screen. The way to exit the screen without doing the calibration is to simply hold down the average N button for 3 seconds. And once you get to this rider screen, now I can pair, now I can go to the service menu, now I can do anything else I need to do. Battery monitoring is important with the MPower system. The V2 console has 3 battery icons at the bottom of the screen that show you the battery life remaining of the batteries in the system. Both of the sensors and the console have batteries. On the bottom you'll see a C, W, R. C is the console batteries, W is the watt sensor battery, R is the RPM sensor battery. These icons will slowly go down as the battery life decreases. When you get to the bottom segment in each of these, you've got about 25% battery life left. When you get down below 20%, it'll actually start flashing. So, important to monitor these. If you see a problem crop up, often it's battery related. This makes it easy to check if a battery is low, which battery it is, then you go replace that battery. Simple as that. There's a few troubleshooting tips when dealing with the console and the power sensor that are good to know. First tip, if something isn't working, if something doesn't seem quite right, the first thing you want to try is just turn the system off, turn it back on. Much like your phone or a computer, occasionally it just needs to be reset. If that doesn't do it, the next step is you can try to pull the batteries out, which gives it more of a full reset, and see if that makes things work. If those two things don't do it, then there's a couple detailed things to look at. So the couple main issues you might see is, first of all, you're getting no watts. Watts are generated by the power sensor, which is here. If you're not getting watts, but you are getting RPMs, then the problem would be with this unit here. First problem, most common problem, is the battery is low or dead. You need to replace the battery. If that's not the issue, if you replace the battery and you're still not getting watts, but you are getting RPMs, then the next thing you would do is pull the system off the bike, try repairing it, and then see if you can get watts. If at that point it's still not working, then you're probably talking about a bad sensor that needs to be replaced. Now, I mentioned if you are not having watts but you do have RPMs. A different situation is if you don't have RPMs and you don't have watts. It's important to know if you don't have RPMs, you won't have watts or anything else, because everything starts with RPMs. The number one problem that causes a lack of RPMs is the RPM sensor on the front of the bike isn't close enough to the wheel and it's not picking up the magnet. We talked about that in the installation guide. Got to get it close enough to the wheel to pick up the magnet. But sometimes things can vibrate, change slightly over time, moves a little bit away, not picking it up. So you want to check that spacing first. Second, battery. Third, it would be a bad sensor, but it's very rare. The last thing, you'll get comments sometimes that the watt values seem wrong on this bike. A couple things with that. One, if the watt values do seem wrong, you can perform a calibration, which we already talked about. If after a calibration the watt values still seem wrong, there's a couple things to understand. First of all, there is some variability from bike to bike. You're talking about a plus or minus 10% range. So bike A might seem a little different than bike B. We're not talking about a big difference, but we can't get too fine with it. So if there's a little bit of difference, that's okay. Secondly, bear in mind there is a discrepancy, there is a difference sometimes between what riders expect their watt values to be, what watt values they expect they can produce, versus what they actually are producing. So point being, sometimes it's the sensor, but if you recalibrate it and you check that you're getting 0.0 at your up position, that sensor's functioning properly, and at that point, those are the readings you're going to get.